The truth lives.
Political Bombshell, starring Rayshawn Blyden.
This is Rayshawn with Political Bombshell. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us this evening.
Yeah, Rayshawn.
All right, now, Jeff is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, and he's going to be talking today with us about public safety assessment tool. Now, I'm not familiar with it, so can you tell us what that is exactly?
Yeah, I'll just give you kind of a simple way to think about it. A bunch of data scientists get together and they try to decide how to separate people into categories. And so most assessment tools, like the Arnold Foundation Risk Assessment Tool, will use, in this case, 6 categories. And so there'll be different scoring mechanisms, and the factors could be things like, how many crimes have you committed? Have you ever served a jail sentence? When were you first arrested? All kinds of different factors. Housing stability, whether you have a job or not. One risk assessment I saw had whether you owned a home or rented, or whether you had a cell phone was a factor on one. So these data scientists decide who goes into these boxes, and then what happens is, depending on what part of a criminal case it's at, let's use bail for an example, because that's the issue I work on. It assigns the bail, whether you get bail, first of all, and then what the conditions and bail will be based on these categories. And so really it's just sort of pigeonholing people into these sort of results based on these computer programs.
Okay, wow. So do you think that that's working, or?
No, I don't. And what we've been able to realize in the last year, because this issue just exploded, it really, and you know how race relations are, anytime there's an issue that something might have a racial bias, the issue explodes. In this case, that was good because we needed to put a spotlight on them, and there might be, racial problems with these things. But really what we've kind of figured out is the system has machined itself from the beginning of a case to the end, and I use Ohio as an example. They have 10 of these risk assessments used, from the second you get arrested all the way until, you're finished serving parole. And these scores determine, important rights, like whether you get to go to a halfway house and things like that, all the way through the system. And so what we've been able to figure out is, and one researcher is arguing, is that this is a reason why the criminal justice system ensnared so many people, because there was no rehabilitation, there was no ability to lock ourselves out of the mentality of the past with all this data. And basically we are, like in, teachers teaching to the test. That's what these algorithms and risk assessments do, is they reinforce how things were, rather than how we want things to be going forward. And so that's why I think, this idea that mass incarceration, if that is a phenomenon, which I think it is, and other issues of people being ensnared in the system and recidivism and rising prison rates, this could be a major cause of that.
Right. Now, is there any way of hacking this system at all?
Well, you bring up another important point, so you're one step ahead of me on this. Google Cloud and other clouds is where many of these private foundations and for-profit companies that house the data, they typically put it on clouds. And so I would assume that it is vulnerable to hacking. Certainly haven't heard of that happening, but, it's definitely a possibility that they just have, the Arnold Foundation has at least 1 million records right now on people, and I presume they have a lot more.
Oh, wow, that's something. So some legislators have been called in to end cash bail altogether. What do you think about that? Good thing or bad thing?
Well, I think in certain cases it's fine to say that, we don't need bail for certain crimes. We also, a big part of the movement is to say that we shouldn't arrest people for certain crimes, and that makes sense. Ending bail altogether is a bad idea, because the result is two things. Either you're supervised and put on probation by the state, or you get no bail and you're locked up. And that's what we're seeing around the country. So I don't think the no money bail movement is the way to go. I think, the anger toward, bail industry and bail in general is somewhat understandable, but I don't think the answer is to just ban it because the alternate system has been proven to be terrible.
Right, because some may say that rich people would be able to afford to get out of jail on bail, while poor will have to stay in jail. What do you say to people who say that?
Well, judges index bails based on people's ability to pay in almost all states, and there's a hearing, and the judges make these decisions. And that's an imperfect system, and I understand how people view that as an imperfect system. But the alternate system would be to say, well, let's let the government decide with these computers, which is what's happening in the federal system in New Jersey, or to just decide in general that you don't get bail because we don't like you. We think you're dangerous. We think you're a bad person, and so you don't get bail. And so that's the alternate world. And then with all the new GPS monitors and all that kind of stuff, they are blanketing these people with conditions and essentially putting them on probation before they're convicted. So, I don't think the alternate universe is better, and I think there's a way to find balance, and that's what we advocate for.
Right. So how is politics involved in bail reform?
Well, you've got politics makes strange bedfellows. I'm sure you're familiar with that saying. And here you've got, some conservative groups, the Coke Industries groups are supporting, at least right now, some significant bail reform. Mostly the reforms are driven from, progressive folks on the left. You got George Soros has been spending a lot of money, the Open Society Foundation and other foundations to support this, as has the Arnold Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation. So primarily I think it's coming from the left side of politics. In terms of actual campaigns and issues, it is a political issue. And where we've seen it the most is issues of district attorney races, where pro-bail reform candidates get funded by these various groups and, knock off sort of seasoned district attorneys like down in San Antonio and in a couple other places, Houston.
Right. Well, with bail reform, because I'm not familiar with this, as far as, let's say you have illegal immigrants in jail, does this work for them as well, or it doesn't matter whoever it is, it's in jail?
Well, yeah, it works for them because, in sanctuary states and cities, they're not going to report them anyway. They're just going to release them. In non-sanctuary states or whatever, if they're released before they can be reported to, the federal authorities, then they're gone. Or if they're not arrested at all. So it definitely can have an impact, and it could, make it easier for repeat, immigrants who are criminals, who I think we're all concerned about, to get away with it a little bit easier.
Right, exactly. I was just going to say that creates a definite problem. That's not good for the country at all. I don't think that's really good for the country. But as far as, so you would say that it's partisan and racial, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, it's got a lot going for it. Some men's groups have argued that it's gender bias, but we don't need to, we don't even need to go there. But yeah, anytime somebody interjects race into the conversation, it becomes important. And the conversation about bail is, well, bail itself is racist. The algorithms could be racist. All this sort of thing. And what I tell people is we need to figure out, does bail make the problem worse? Does do risk assessments make the problem worse? But those arguments are, certainly out there and being pushed by groups like Color of Change and others.
So tell me a little bit about your American Bail Coalition.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about what you guys do.
So, we do a lot of stuff like this where I'll talk to media outlets and media people like yourself. We'll go to various state capitals to talk about legislation. And then, of course, we do policy documents and other documents, talk to federal legislators and local officials as well. The group I represent, the American Bail Coalition, are insurance companies that are underwriters, meaning that they back all the bonds written by the various bail agents who actually bail people out of jail throughout the country. So we're the guys that kind of, make sure that at the end of the day, if liability needs to be paid, that it's paid, and that we're, writing the business correctly, meaning that we're underwriting it properly so that, the whole goal is to avoid losses and make sure that people go to court.
Right. So yeah, I'm not too familiar with bail. Like the process works where I like, let's say I'm in jail and I need bail. I have to put up like maybe my home for collateral or something like that.
Well, it all depends. It all depends on what the size of the bail. Collateral is rarely used on small bails. So let's say that your bail was $5,000, just to make it easy. You would pay, if you called a bail agent, usually you would have to pay a premium of $500, which in most places agents would let you pay over time with no interest. So, if you're paying $50 a month or whatever, you have to pay the entire 10% of the face amount of the bond. If you don't want to use a bail agent, you just post the entire amount of the $5,000, and that's what sort of the wealthier people do is they have the money sitting there, they just go deposit it. If you do that, in most cases, if you are found not guilty, you get your money back if you posted it with the court. And then in some states they have what's called 10% to the court, which rather than paying 10% to a bail agent, you actually pay 10% to the court, and you're on what's called an unsecured bond. So what happens is, if you fail to appear in court as required, a bondsman will forfeit the entire bond, or if you posted your own cash, you'll forfeit all of your entire cash. And so in the case of a bondsman, you've only paid the bondsman 10%. Well, they're going to have to pay the entire 100%, meaning the rest of the 90%. So they have an incentive and they have arrest powers to go return you to court. That's kind of a thumbnail sketch of how it works.
Oh, okay. So if you run, do you like hire like a what you call bounty hunter or something?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
We call them bail recovery agents, but they were popularized by Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Okay.
Remember
Okay.
what I'm talking about?
Right. So this tool, to me, I mean, just based on what you're telling me, and I've never heard of this tool before, to me it doesn't sound like it's working at all, and it sounds like it may put citizens, in danger. To me, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and that's been the second half of the problem, is not only does it work, is it not fair, but that we've seen cases primarily and particularly prior felons in possession of firearms getting counted as low risk. We've seen that from coast to coast, and that's just pure dangerous.
You're kidding me.
Oh, no.
Are you
when you
serious?
have somebody, yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, I can give you a couple examples if you want. But so we've seen that from coast to coast, and that's a problem. When somebody is a prior felon, they're lifetime gun prohibited because of a prior violent offense. They have a gun, they're pulled over with it, and then, the risk assessment tool says, they're low risk. And then they get released only to go on to harm other people. That's no good. And we're definitely seeing that.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to hear an example if you can give me one.
Sure.
This is it sounds really dangerous to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's two quick ones I can give you. One was a case, Christian Rogers, who lived in New Jersey. The suspect got arrested, prior felon in possession of a firearm, cited for traffic offenses, but obviously had the gun, concealed it, was taken before the tool did the assessment, and he was assessed as a medium low risk, and under New Jersey there's no bail, so the judge didn't impose bail. You either get locked up or released, so he got released, and then several days later, his mom, June Rogers, came home to find out her son Christian was shot 22 times by this guy, who had gone out and got another firearm and obviously basically unloaded 2 clips into Mr. Rogers, unfortunately. And then the other one, very similar, in San Francisco, to a prior felon in possession of a firearm was released. He and a co-conspirator were going to go buy drugs or something, and they went to an area in San Francisco called Twin Peaks, which is a kind of a scenic overlook, and a man by the name of Edward French was taking a picture with his camera up there. They robbed him, killed him to steal his camera, and of course, they had just been released. He had just been released, several days prior to that as a prior felon in possession of firearms. So, and the New Jersey Attorney General recognized after that case that we have to make some adjustments, but I'm just not convinced that they've done it correctly. But those would be a couple examples I'd give.
Right. So wow, I don't even know what to say. That's just horrible. I can't believe that
Right.
this is actually happening.
Well, what I tell people is, if it
Go
doesn't
ahead.
pass the common sense test, then it can't be scientific.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. So they're still using this tool today?
Oh yeah. No, it's being used in probably 40 or 50 jurisdictions.
And I'm assuming that they haven't really adjusted it, or I don't know if they could adjust it or make it more accurate. Is it even possible to make it more accurate, or just scrap it all? I mean, to me, it sounds like they should just scrap it all together. Honestly, I mean, if you're letting murderers like that go, and then they're killing people are getting killed, this is ridiculous.
It is. No, I'd like to think that we could do it, but since we've been doing it for so long with these basic sorting people into categories thing, I don't think it's going to work at the end of the day. I don't think we can fix the problem using this, because all we're doing is sorting people into categories and then forcing a result. Well, I got to tell you, there's more human personalities than 1 through 6, and there's a lot more to criminal justice than 1 through 6. It's a lot more complicated than that. And I think if we get away from the mentality that everybody's risky and start trying to figure out things that work and prevent people from getting in the system, we get better results.
Now, what can we do as citizens to try to stop the movement? So we call our legislators, or how can we try to help?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think talk to your public officials and tell them that, you don't think these risk assessment algorithms in criminal justice work, and you think they ought to take a second look at it. And it's very similar to the Facebook and the Google thing. When we lift up the rock, we find some things that we don't want to find, and I think we'll find a lot if we put the spotlight on this issue.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. Don't even get me started on Facebook. That's another. That's a whole show by itself.
All right. Well, we can talk about that next time.
So, how could people reach your coalition?
It's
online.
the AmericanBailCoalition.org, and usually click in the news section has our latest posts. And of course, we're on Facebook if you can bear to get on there, or we're also on Twitter.
Okay. So,
And
yeah, I definitely want to follow up, and if anything changes in this, I'd like to have you on again and definitely talk about it. I mean, this is I didn't know that this was going on, but I'm definitely gonna try to shine some type of spotlight on this.
Oh yeah, you definitely should. It's the hottest issue in criminal justice right now, I can tell you. It's hot. So, and I'd love to come back on.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us, Jeff.
All right, you got it. Have a good night.
Thanks. You too.